Ned's on his way.
Okay, Ms. Cole, are we good to go?
Yes.
Alrighty. I call this meeting to order. Today is Wednesday, October 27th, 2021. The time is 5 p.m. This is a meeting of the City of Berkeley's Reimagining Public Safety Task Force. Pursuant to Section 3 of Executive Order N2920 issued by Governor Newsom on March 17, 2020, this meeting of the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force will be conducted exclusively through teleconference and Zoom video conference. Please be advised that pursuant to the Executive Order and to ensure the health and safety of the public by limiting human contact that could spread the COVID-19 virus, there will be no physical meeting location available. Let's go ahead to roll call, please.
Commissioner Fine.
Present.
Commissioner Jigu.
Present.
Vice Chair Chima.
Present.
Commissioner Lindheim.
Present.
Commissioner Ghosh. Commissioner Hyde.
Present.
Commissioner Malvito. Chair Mizell.
Here.
Commissioner Opton.
Present.
Commissioner Harger.
Present.
Commissioner Letzker.
Here.
Commissioner Ho.
She will be
Commissioner
30
Danger.
minutes late.
Thank you. Noted. Commissioner Dangerfield. Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Moon. And Commissioner Crook.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alrighty, let's go ahead to public comment then. Not too many hands.
Chair, I don't see any hands raised for public comment this time.
Okay, I think he emailed me. Was there a written public comment, I believe? Let me check that.
While you're looking for that, we do have one hand raised, so I will allow them to come in.
Okay, thank you.
Glenn Turner, you should be allowed to speak.
Hi, I want to make sure that you're aware and take note of the way other places have handled non-police responses to mental illness calls, in particular Cahoots and so on. I'm sure you have all of these other examples that Berkeley should follow. Having the ambassadors who get trained by the police be first responders really would not be a good model, because police training makes a person act in ways that are not good for mental health responses. So it really should be someone who is skilled in crisis management, and maybe a peer along with that response. So certainly we could set up some of our community and fund our community groups to do this particular job instead of police trained personnel. Thank you.
Next, we have Steve Martineau. Should be able to speak.
Hi. Yeah, I just arrived, so I hope this isn't too much duplication with what other people have said. But what I want to point out is that the way in which the CERN, the Community Emergency Response Network, has been presented as a possible SCU is as a non-law enforcement crime reduction strategy. And I think that we have to get away from the idea that every time anybody calls 911 or calls for assistance or help, that there's a crime being committed. This is one of the things that lead the police to overreact and to, like really lay waste when there's somebody is in some kind of an emotional situation and they are faced with men with guns. And that's a strong part of what we're trying to, correct for and overcome. And that is, there is this tendency as soon as an assumption is made that there is a crime being committed, there was a military response. And what we're asked here to look at is a military response reduction strategy. That's not good enough. We need to be able to assume that there are people who are not involved in a crime situation, and that needs to be, in some sense, judged by the dispatcher, but are in a non-crime situation and not go into it looking at it as if we have to, or whoever is responding has to, be ready to deal with a crime situation. It's a sense of being able to help, to assist people with things. If they call for help or assistance, that's what they should get. And that needs to be independent of all military response. It's for that, it's in that sense and for that reason that we're opting and suggesting and really, proposing for a CSU that is independent of the police and can make an independent judgment of what the situation is there and not have to be controlled by the police or responsible to the police or responsible to any kind of law enforcement aspect when they first get there and take a look and try to help the people or the person who is asking for help. Thank you.
Chair, next I will bring in Mariah. You should be allowed to speak.
Hi, Mariah Yates, District 1. Can you still
Mariah,
hear
are you
us?
there?
Yeah.
Yes. Thank
Okay.
you.
Sorry, thank you so
I'll
much.
restart you.
Thank you. Mariah Yates, District 1. Volunteer with Berkeley Cop Watch. I have worked in all the different farmers markets locations in Berkeley for many years. And I volunteered for a couple years with the Needle Exchange here in town. That was back in 2011, 2012. I believe that Berkeley's first priority for public safety should be paid mental health professionals. CopWatch does not hear good things about the Downtown Ambassador program, and residents of the downtown area first did report a positive to neutral interaction with the Ambassador program prior to the pandemic, but these interactions have shifted in the past year and a half and taken on a decidedly negative tone. Now, unsurprisingly, this seems to correspond with the new position added to the ambassador team, those of ambassadors equipped with batons, pepper spray, and handcuffs. So the addition of these private armed guards has impacted the overall tone of the ambassador program. They have handcuffs in order to perform citizens' arrests. So if your goal is to avoid police interaction or decrease the footprint of policing in Berkeley, especially in interactions involving marginalized communities, the ambassadors will not meet that need. And built into their job description and equipping is the intention of being a direct bridge to the police. So from the Street Plus website, quote, "In many locations, our safety ambassadors have direct communication to 911 dispatch, and we patrol with local law enforcement." Also, as a private entity, they're not subject to or accountable to the oversight regulations in place for Berkeley Police, which include very specific standards regarding batons, chemical agents, and reporting uses of force. So without explicit knowledge of their training or training standards, and without clear transparency around complaint paths or accountability, it basically makes the security for hire even less accountable to our community than our already unaccountable police force. And as a service funded by the Downtown Business Association, the organization is there to protect the business interests of the association's membership. And honestly, I feel it's a continuation of the city's already selectively enforced anti-homeless and anti-poor policies. I think it should be noted the 2015 case that was caught on film of an ambassador beating a homeless man. And Berkeley's first priority for public safety should be paid mental health professionals. That would improve my quality of life. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have Alana Auerbach, should be able to speak.
Hi, thank you. Yes, Ilana Auerbach, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So just to represent what you all, thank you so much for your service on this task force. I really appreciate each of you. I know you're spending a lot of time and I know you're not getting paid much. So first I want to just say, express my gratitude to each of you. Second, I'd like to present what you all are tasked with, which I know you know really well, but it just is important for me to present that your task was to reimagine public safety so that we can implement a new community-centered safety paradigm as a foundation for deep and lasting change. So that's what a beautiful vision and intention that you all signed on to as part of what you're doing. Hooray. So now we're coming to the home stretch and looking at what is really going to reimagine. Reimagining is taking care of the crises that are on the street that as a resident of Berkeley, I'm engaged with on a daily, and most of us who are out there walking around, which is mental health and substance use crises and homelessness. That's what those are the two that create public safety issues. And yes, there's been an uptick in gun violence, and we know that ceasefire and gun prevention programs are what's needed. So I'd really encourage you to include a gun prevention program like Nick Jr. Leads all around the country, or Advocate Peace that they did in Stockton to save millions and tens of millions of dollars, and to provide a non-police response to crises, certainly those that involve mental health, substance use, and or homelessness, and many, many others. But really just to start with that, which we know is at least 20% of their time, to take that. So make sure that CERN does not have any police, does not have any ambassadors. We know from John Kahner's comments at a different meeting that there's a contentious relationship. He said, and I feel bad that the ambassadors are getting, probably, names, being called names and so forth. There's not a good, peaceful, harmonious relationship between the people who live on the street in the downtown and the ambassadors. So to give the ambassadors a place intending to responding to crisis makes absolutely no sense when there is already acrimony there. Thank you.
Next, we have Carol Marasevich, should be able to speak.
One of the commenters said we needed more mental health professionals. One of the difficulties is we already have well-paid mental health professionals. We have a very well-paid staff at Berkeley Mental Health that is well-funded. And outside of the excellent mobile crisis workers who have always been understaffed and have not been available 24/7, where are they? Because they're not on the streets, and we can see mental health crises all around us, and we need that 24/7 coverage. So I think there has been a component missing here where there hasn't been a deep look at Berkeley mental health. We know the mobile crisis have been understaffed and they've been spoken of highly here, but how does Berkeley mental health fit into the mental health services in Berkeley and the unmet needs? I think it's easy to make decisions on the quality of life issues and say that the police don't have to be there when there's an issue of something that's just a quality of life, non-criminal issue. It's easy to say you don't need a police officer there in a suicide situation, attempted suicide threat, unless that person has a weapon there that could potentially be used against themselves or someone else. However, that comes around again then to raise that there are going to be those situations where there is going to be a component of violence and a mental health issue. And the police should not be going out alone in those situations. You're going to have the police there in domestic violence situations. You're going to have the police there when someone in mental health crisis is threatening, has a weapon, etc., and clearly has a mental health issue. And so what you need to do is you need to have a clinician with those police, and you need to have well-trained CIT police in those situations so that the police are not going out alone. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Audrey Burnham.
Hi, thank you for your time. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, cool, thank you. I just wanted to ask that you please keep police and downtown ambassadors and UC Berkeley, just anyone affiliated with police or that has like police-like roles out of CERN. And also to like, I was just thinking too, if it's possible, could you offer those jobs to people who are unhoused first to see if anyone would fill those roles too? Because I feel like I've heard people who are closest to it's not, I don't even want to say that because they're not a problem. The problem is us. So like just not housing people. And so I just wanted to put that out there to like see if you could offer the roles to people who have the hardest times finding jobs and really offer the jobs to the people who are unhoused first, and then people who are who are coming out of prison and jail. But whatever you do, I just would really like to ask that you please keep all police out and all of the downtown ambassadors and the UC Berkeley quote unquote community safety people. So thank you very much for your time.
Next, we have Andrea Pritchett.
Good evening.
Andrea?
Yeah.
Hi.
Thank you. Hi there. Yeah, I just want to weigh in on my understanding of the creation of the CERN. And I think it's disastrous, honestly. I feel kind of betrayed by those recommendations, by the creation, by the formulation of the CERN. Because what it represents to me is an expansion of the police department by engaging the downtown, the downtown ambassadors who have been the eyes and the ears of the police since their inception. When they're not actually perpetrating acts of violence and harassment against the unhoused community, they work in tandem to the point where they're an appendage of the police. And so please don't offer that as an alternative to the police. Community service officers from the UC Berkeley, those are the same folks that infiltrated my student group back when we were at UC Berkeley. They're also an appendage of the police. You're gonna do what you're gonna do, and I'm sorry that those recommendations are that you've been offered the CERN, because whether the police quote unquote lead or whether they quote unquote follow the staff of the CERN, it's all police to us. And that taint will undermine and ultimately doom your efforts. But what I ask you, please, if nothing else, do what you will. Do not put the SCU under the police department, which is in what the CERN does. That the SCU, let it be independent. Let it be independently funded. Let it be independently supervised. Please, at least let us serve our community in this way. we know that people, you did not survey. How many people didn't call for help because they feared getting police? I can tell you I'm one of them, and I know many others. So please, I know this process will be, there are many of us who are considering whether or not we need to denounce it now. And it's up to you, the task members, whether you're able to grab hold of this process. I hope you will. I hope you will be bold. And you remember, even as private citizens, you can continue to meet after this process is quote unquote ended by the city. But you can continue to meet and you can distinguish yourselves from this sort of what can I say, diabolical scheme.
Please wrap your comments.
Yeah, so I actually feel very betrayed. I feel like it's a bait and switch. We were offered defunding and reimagining, and what we're getting is an expansion of the police. So thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you. Next, I'll bring in Diana. Should be allowed to speak, Diana. Diana, you're on mute. Diana, you should be able to speak. Okay, perhaps Diana's having an issue, Chair. So I believe that's it for public comment.
Looks like we got another hand.
Oh, sorry, it just popped up. Thank you.
Yeah, no,
Emily, you should be allowed to speak.
Thanks. I'll just ask a quick. Can you, it looks like you.
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you now. Thank you.
Question in case, so Diana can maybe figure out their issues. I was just hoping maybe someone could clarify. I didn't see Commissioner Crook's name on the agenda, and maybe just kind of which person was appointed, or is it an at-large seat or what? I don't know if that could be clarified at some point, just to have a sense of who the new faces are. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Chair, it looks like that is it for public comment.
I think Diana, I think Diana's raising their hand again.
That I think that's the same, but I'll try it again if you want.
Okay. Yeah, one more time.
Diana?
Hello, am I
Okay.
unmuted? Can you hear
You're
me?
unmuted. You should be able to speak now.
Okay. What I wanted to say is I agree with the previous speakers that we asked for care, not cops, and the police should not be part of CERN. Mental health and substance abuse issues and homelessness issues should be handled by mental health workers and people that can help with homelessness and all those issues. And also the outreach, the mobile crisis unit should also be 24/7. So I agree that the police should not be part of this. We asked for a special care unit, not more police. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That is all for public comment.
Commissioner Linton?
Unfortunately, I had to leave early after about 2 hours last time, and I just wanted to make sure that I hadn't missed something critical. I wasn't aware that we have endorsed CERN in one way or any way so far, whatever its merits. Secondly, the same applies to to ceasefire. And I just want to make sure that I didn't miss something, because I would be concerned if those opinions had been reached. So I just wanted to make sure that those haven't been somehow accepted. That was the tenor of some of the comments, and I just wanted to make sure that I hadn't missed something.
No recommendations in any direction were reached at the last meeting. Okay, let's see. Actually, no, before we go to approval of the minutes, my apologies. Wanted to give our new commissioner opportunity to introduce themselves if they'd like. Commissioner Crook, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Jamie Cook. I was just appointed by Councilmember Harrison to take over. Actually, not sure who had that, her seat before, but here I am. I'm a civil rights attorney. I've lived in Berkeley, this time for about 3 years. I was here earlier in the 2000s as well, raising a family here with 3 kids, and I'm excited to be part of this task force.
Thank you. Glad to have you here for this really pivotal part of the process. All righty, so yeah, let's go ahead to approve of the minutes. Any questions, comments about the minutes from our last meeting? Okay, motion to approve the minutes of October 14th.
So moved.
Seconded. Commissioner Hyde.
Okay to call roll, Chair?
Yes.
Yes. Commissioner Fine,
Yes.
Commissioner Jigu,
Yes.
Vice Chair Chima,
Yes.
Commissioner Lindheim,
Yes.
Commissioner Ghosh,
Yes.
Commissioner Hyde,
Yes.
Commissioner Movito, Chair Mizell,
Yes.
Commissioner Opton,
Yes.
Commissioner Moon, Commissioner Harger,
Yes.
Commissioner Lutzker,
Yes.
Commissioner Ho,
Yes.
Commissioner Dangerfield, Commissioner Thompson, and Commissioner Crook. Don't believe you were here, but
I'll say
you
yes.
can abstain. You can. Thank you.
Thank you. We can go ahead and move to our action items for today. And that is for me and our discussing our process for recommendations and really developing, real and comprehensive feedback for Nick Jr.'s draft report. So I guess for the first prong here, reviewing the table of contents. So Cheryl, good to see you. I don't know if you want to display it. I know it's mainly split up into those 3 sections, but happy to have you jump in.
Yeah, I'm happy to share the outline of the report.
Give me a second, Cheryl, to give you access. No,
Thank
thank you.
Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
All right. So it's really, so the areas that, you can see the outline of the report. The areas that the recommendations are going to be in are going to be divided up between reduce, improve, and reinvest. So that's really where, I can share this for a second so everybody can see it, but that's really where the implementation plan and the recommendations are.
Okay, in terms of, I guess, recommendations per section, can you give me a rough number?
I don't have a rough number.
Okay.
Yeah, but I can tell you that what we've talked about in and I can stop sharing. In dividing them up between reduce, improve, and reinvest is the best way to do it. I know they overlap a little bit. I know there are sort of some areas that are gonna, you know, something in reinvest might have to do with something in reduce or improve, but it will get too complicated. And I can also share with you what the feedback survey is going to look like.
Yes.
I'll in a second. It'll get too complicated if we try to split it up in a different way, because you're going to be looking for references. You're going to be looking for, you know, citations or information. So I think if people are able to look at the report and a group of people are able to take reduce, because reduce, each section can stand on its own. You might be able to say, I agree with the recommendation in improve. How we get there, and you can make, and as I show you in the survey, you can make a comment in that saying, I agree with how we improve. How we get there, I have some questions about, and I need some more information about, right?
Yes.
So do you want me to share with you what the feedback survey is going to look like?
Yes, please.
All right, and this is for task force members. Hold on. So each recommendation will have an opportunity to agree with edits, or disagree. And then there's a narrative section so that you can add a narrative comment to that. So we'll be able to have a sort of tally of agree with edits, and disagree on every single recommendation. And then whether it's a group response, and you can take the survey as like if you want to do it by subcommittees, you can take the survey as subcommittees, and this can be submitted by the community engagement subcommittee or submitted by the gender equity and violence subcommittee. Or you can decide that you want to simply people who feel inclined to look at reinvest, right? You don't have to necessarily do it because I chose to be on the subcommittee for community engagement. I have to be in reinvest, right? So that's a discussion for the task force of how you want to divide up who's looking at which section, if you want to do it by sections.
And thank you. And yeah, we're going to kind of keep it fluid today. Commissioner Fine.
Yeah, you know, I'm a little concerned here because what I think is that the Reimagining Facts Task Force makes a decision about how we want to respond, not to be told how Nick Jr. wants us to fill it out for you and give you data. Because I could sit here and say, you know, the Urban Institute put out their model on community safety and community investments. And what does that look like with reduce, improve, and reinvest? And how does that fit in? But I think like at the end of the day, that this task force has to, in some ways, come to its own conclusions about the way in which it wants to respond.
I agree. And we certainly still retain all our powers and rights to do that. Though this was, you know, at least for the survey, you know, how we can give feedback to Nick Jr. in the most effective way, but we still do have the ability to do other things as well.
And in that context, that every member on the task force has access to anything that's submitted to Nick Jr., so we know what's going on.
Yeah, in my mind, I imagined, you know, once you submitted, well, before you submit that either a subcommittee or individual, you know, you have a shared document. So you really, you know, have everything in order and can refer to it later. Commissioner Harger.
Yeah, so what's the turnaround time going to be between when we submit our feedback and when the contract ends for NICJR?
So we are submitting the final report to you as a draft to the city, not the city council, on Friday. So Friday, the 29th. We need final feedback in order for us to take any feedback and put it into the report that is presented to the city council. We need that by November 26th. So that's 4 weeks. And then what is, and I think we talked about this the last meeting, is that, you know, what is submitted to the city council doesn't have to be the final. The task force can decide to write a supplemental response that can be included in the final report.
So, Ms. Cole, sorry to interrupt. Can you remind me do we have a proposed date yet for when that council meeting would be, or the updated proposed date?
The 13th, I believe.
13th.
The 13th.
Monday the 13th, yes.
But then it has to be submitted to them prior to that, right?
Yeah. Commissioner Lutzker.
Hi, thanks. So I know I'm kind of going to sound like a broken record, but I'm really still curious about this. Like, I feel like it's going to be difficult for us to decide who's going to talk about what when we still don't even understand the scope of what is going to be recommended in the report. Like, how much of this is going, I think it would be helpful. And I understand, Cheryl, that, you know, it's the draft, it's still in draft form, but like, for me, knowing whether I think it's appropriate for subcommittee A or B or C to respond to each, like understanding the scope of what is and isn't included, like where does SCU fall in here? Where does BRCDOT? Where do things that are not calls for service fall in here? Are they part of it? I think all of that, like, I feel like that outline shell is like, you know, so bare bones that it's very difficult for us to really understand how to divide ourselves up and report. And I also want to ask, where in the feedback is there room for us to add things that don't have to do with recommendations, that are things that we feel, again, speaking to the scope, things that we feel like haven't been addressed at all?
And I think to that last part, I think to Commissioner Fine's point, I think there is power in the task force to decide to add additional elements, to say there aren't included that we want to explore. There are things not in, that the task force can offer a supplemental report that is in response to what is in the report or not in the report.
And are you at liberty to talk about whether those specific items that I brought up are in or are not in the report? For example, SCU, BRCDOT, and anything related that is not directly related to calls to for service?
Sure. I mean, I think we've seen those in the new and emerging models report. We've seen them in alternative responses report. And I think we've talked at task force meetings previously about the information that we've been getting from SCU and BRCDOT as much as we can while they're parallel processes happening, right? So yes, they'll be in the final report. You know, I think we've talked about it in previous meetings about how they will both be. We can only address as much information about the SCU and BRCDOT that we have, and with the information that we have, we're absolutely including BRCDOT and SCU in the final report.
Commissioner Lentine.
I want to be really clear. There is nothing in the consultant report that either does or does not represent feelings of the committee. This hasn't been a joint process. The only feedback or the only participation that we have had is to ask questions about fairly, let's just say, super draft versions of what is being talked about. I have no problem providing specific feedback to each of the items, but that doesn't represent our, as a committee or whatever we are, task force, view about reimagining. And so I'm concerned, two things. One is, in all of this, how are we ever going to come up with our task force recommendations as a task force? Number one. But number two, if this report has to go to the council, I assume that that date, the 11th, is November. Is that right?
The 13th is
Or 13th?
December.
December. Okay. Okay.
Get presented to the city council.
Oh, okay. So it still means 3 or 4 weeks for us to come up with whatever it is, whether the word is supplemental, additional, or completely different. And there may be things in the consultant report that are great, and there may be things that we think just don't make any sense at all. But we haven't had an opportunity yet to talk about any of these things. And I just want to make sure that we're not being somehow shoehorned into, yes, we have marginal comments on what the consultant had to say when we haven't been part of the consultant process. You know, we have an idea of what they're talking about. And I have no idea whether we as a task force are even clear about what some of their terms are. Clearly, the people speaking on public comment had very different points of view about what any of these words meant. And, you know, so we're going to have to sort of deal with those things ourselves, and also come up with a process by which we're actually going to come up with something that we think represents what we have to say. But I really don't want to be shoehorned into being an addendum to a consultant report that we haven't been participant to.
Yeah, I can jump in a little bit there, Commissioner. Yeah, first of all, yes, you're completely right. Obviously, we've not written a single word in Nick Jr.'s reports. We've asked questions and made, you know, different recommendations and comments, but it won't be our report. What can be ours certainly is a companion report of sorts. You know, I've imagined, and obviously once we get the draft report, I'll have a better idea once I've read over it. But, you know, I've imagined that we will go, you know, recommendation by recommendation. And, you know, obviously on the ones where we have consensus, we don't need to spend lots of time on it, but where we don't, as a task force, we can stop and have that discussion. And we should have time for that discussion because, as we'll get to later in the agenda, next steps, you know, we're planning to schedule 2 more meetings on, I think, the Thursday, November 18th, and then December 2nd, I believe. So that first November meeting would really enable us to sit down after we've all sat with the report and really hash out, you know, where our positioning is on, you know, the recommendations of the report. From that, I think we can produce our own written document that, you know, may add comments, maybe that this scope should be touched on in the reimagining process. I'm not going to pretend like I have a full solution on that yet, but I do know we'll have the opportunity to do that. And I honestly am looking really to all of y'all in terms of how to best conduct that process. But I do want to be very clear that, you know, at least I'm not going to just leave it till, you know, I said feedback on the survey and that's it. Certainly we'll have a greater voice than that in a written document and at council. If I go to Ms. Bello, do you have something?
Yes, so thank you so much, Chair Mizell, but you're moving right in the direction that I wanted to just make certain that we state for the record. On the meeting, Commissioner Lindheim, on December 13th, it is the intention that Nick Jr. will present their report, and then the task force will have an opportunity to present their report or perspective as well. And so it is not just one item or report or process will go forward without the council and the public having the benefit of hearing from the task force, one, in their written materials that are submitted, and then two, in your ability to speak on the record. So I just wanted to also let you know, in addition to the two meetings that we'll get to later on, that the chair and the vice chair has also ensured and advocated that there's an opportunity for this task force to actually speak that night as well. So that's all I wanted to add. Thank you, Chair Mizell.
Thank you. I think it's Commissioner Harder.
Thank you. So two things. The first is I'm hoping that we could get some kind of like codified timeline put onto the website of like when this report is going to be released, when we will be seeing it, when it will go to city council, because you know, we are all in this meeting. Not everybody tracking this process is in this meeting or will have the time to watch the recording of this meeting, but people still want to know what's going on. So I think if we could make that public, that would be very helpful. And then secondly, I think that the public comments that we got about CERN show us that there's definitely nowhere near consensus or even comfort with the plan that has been presented by NICJR. And so I suppose my question is, to what degree is feedback being incorporated with the CERN plan? Like, is what was presented to us what's going to be in the report? Because if that's the case, I am very concerned by that. But if it's still in flux or being tweaked, I'd also like to hear that as well. Just like a little bit more clarity around like what pieces are moving, what pieces are solidified, particularly around CERN.
I mean, I don't know. I don't have the capacity now to go back and tell you and go through again all of the changes that were made in CERN and in the alternative responses and calls for service that we've gone through in previous presentations. I think that there has been feedback from task force members on all of the reports. And the feedback has been not just questions, but feedback that has resulted in changes from community engagement to alternative responses and the calls for service. So I'm not sure specifically what you're asking for about CERN, but I think that we're 48 hours. It's Wednesday. We're 48 hours from the final report, and so we're sort of talking about something that we haven't seen yet. And I think that we are best served to be having conversations about, and again, all of these things have been presented over the last 6 months, that there is not necessarily a new element. Like the final report is not a surprise. There are 4 reports that preceded it. And so I think that 48 hours from now, we will have the final report with specific recommendations. And I think that Commissioner Mizell's comment about what the task force has the capacity to do in response to that, I think is very valid. I think that you have every capacity and the opportunity to give responses to the recommendations and the CERN as you see it in the final report. And even, you know, you can, knowing what you know now about the CERN, I think your feedback is, you can put that together in writing as well.
Okay, so then to follow up, I just want to make clear once again, like how much impact we and the community get to have on the report put forward by NICJR, because like a whole bunch of people just called in, they said the CERN model is very concerning. I'm asking the question of whether that's going to be incorporated in any way, right? Because I understand that we're 48 hours out from the report, so I'm no longer asking you to speculate as to what's on the report or explain what's on the report, but is the limit of our feedback and our collaboration going to be us filling out a Google form and sending comments that are then like added with asterisks, or is it going to be like, we look at it, we say, this is what I'm hearing from my community, this is what I'm seeing in the report, can we change it? Like, is there any way in which there will be an interface between our comments and your report, or are we really just going to be like annotating?
So I think there are two opportunities. I think that the survey is an opportunity for you individually and collectively to identify things that you specifically disagree with or agree with adjustments to them. And I think to Commissioner Meisel's point again, is that you have the opportunity to write additional information that will impact. And to Ms. Bellows' point is that you will have an opportunity to present as well at that meeting on the 13th.
Okay, but NICJR will not actually make changes to their report based on our feedback. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer to that, because I think that there is a recommendation based on experience, expertise, and history, and Berkeley, and the feedback that we've been receiving. We've had discussions about calls for service. We've taken feedback from calls for service and alternative responses with respect to CERN and made adjustments. I think we've done several presentations about it that have made adjustments based on task force feedback. So I think all those things have already happened. And I don't know that there's the capacity in 4 weeks to make enormous changes. And I invite you to write your responses to those.
So in short, the answer is no.
Well, the answer is we've been taking the input.
Right, but at this point, when we read the report and we give feedback, it will not be incorporated, and we will have a parallel report, is what you are saying.
I think we will have to look at that collectively and see what the capacity is and see what the opportunity is. It's not a no, it's an I don't have an answer for you, because I don't know what the change request is, right? If the change request is something that is completely out of alignment of what history and expertise tells us, then it might not be possible. So it's an I don't have an answer, because I don't know what you're not giving me specific. Will you make this specific change? I don't know, right? So theoretically, I don't know if the changes will be able to be made.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just add, I think it would very much be, once we get the draft report, and again on the I believe the 17th, we can sit down for that meeting and have that conversation about, okay, recommendation 11 is this and this and this, and by then all of us would have had time to read the report and have responses ready, and Boona might say, yeah, recommendation 11 is, horrible, and we have to change it, and communities advocating for change. And, maybe it is, maybe 11 is just the worst one. So once we have that conversation, we go into Junior and say, okay, so 11, do we see change possible there? Are you willing to do that? If they say, oh yeah, that's a small tweak and we think it's important, I hope that change will go in on their side of the report. Perhaps we don't have to write as in depth on our side. If we say, no, this is really important, it has to be changed in the report, and the Junior says, I'm sorry, we can't do it, then that's our opportunity to respond with our own writing in our own words. I think, let me go to Boona.
I think I can help a little bit here. One, my understanding is that the December 13th session with the council is a work session, that is, and tell me if I'm wrong, Tanya, that is not probably the evening when they will be adopting recommendations. So could you clarify that?
You are correct, Vice Chair Chima. It is scheduled as a work session.
Yeah, and that means that there might be council members who want things taken out or added. So, that if Nick Jr.'s report says something that it doesn't sit well with a particular council person, and they recommend something different and get the votes to have something different, would you be adding their recommendation to your report? Would you be changing that? Or will that come as separate documents?
Sorry. again, I think we're sort of going down a theoretical. Well, we could have 100 different scenarios of, will you do it then? Will you do it then? How about now? How about now? Right. And so I'm a little bit cautious to say we will or we won't, because we're talking theoreticals. And so what I will say is that the process is collaborative in the sense that everybody has a voice here. Right. So
Let me
if
add
there is
to
a strong disagreement, if we submit the report and the task force disagrees or agrees with the whole report, however that plays out, the task force's voice will be heard. And I'm hoping that it will be heard in the final, that you will see the representation in the final report based on all of the feedback that we've had along the way. And if not, there is still a process for the task force to say that moving forward.
And Cheryl, the same would be true from the feedback from all of the town halls. You know, the feedback process is not just the task force, but I do believe that at some point we might need to have to vote recommendation by recommendation as they're put in that format. And this could happen after we've sent our first round of agree, don't agree, want this change. Here's my 500 pages of what I would like to see in it. That at least on the ones that we want modified and the ones that we don't agree with, we need to be able to vote to see where the entire task force sits. We can't assume that the entire task force, I'm just saying this to make a point, that the entire task force would agree with take CERN out completely. I'm not sure that the entire task force would say that, oh, we as the task force need to take all the work that RDA and Dr. Warhus's steering committee has been doing and those reports, and want those reports added into your report. That I understand are standalone things. But I also feel that the task force's work is not going to be done December the 13th, because that's the first time the council is looking at the report in the middle of a work session and have the ability to ask a lot of questions. And knowing our mayor and council, they will have a lot of questions. But I would like to see us vote at the December 2nd meeting. If people feel that that would be a fairer process, by then we should, whether we're working in our subcommittees or as pods of people, that we should have all of the pieces read, looked at, analyzed, and ask for language changes or ask for new language or new recommendations. And I think there's enough room to accommodate all of the concerns that have come up in this meeting so far. Or maybe that's just the optimist in me, but seeing city processes, they don't just begin and end. The entire implementation phase won't even start until the funding has been decided. You know, and then there's a whole piece of work that hasn't been done yet. And that's around what is the capacity at the field level for community-based organizations to start replacing police activities. That work has not been done yet.
Right.
So, those are the suggestions that I have, and we can talk about them more or take responses from people, but I would like to see those recommendations voted on.
Commissioner Fine.
First of all, I wanted to say the CERN, the citywide coordinating system, and that whole topic was going to be on the agenda tonight, but it will be on November 13. I had a conversation with Nathan and then I followed it up with the city because there was not notice provided.
November 18th, Margaret, 18th.
Oh, okay, thank you. So just so people rest assured, this is not going to just go away. There's going to be a task force discussion about it. Secondly, I feel like sometimes, for instance, at the last meeting, I did bring up very specific examples dealing with that. framework, and David Mohammed was on there and said he didn't agree with me and said he would provide the details about the personnel for the CERN, meaning what they will be doing, the citywide coordinating system. I mean, I laid it out. If Ms. Cole is willing, she can forward you the background information I had today, where I've sent it to all the task force members and documented every single thing with Reimagining, so people know that I've read all your reports and I am being clear. But what I really think too is we're talking, first of all, conceptually about a theoretical idea of reimagining and a new holistic, equitable community safety model. And I know you have it in your framework of reduce, improve, reinvest, but fundamentally, there's something to talk about here between providing services and policing. And no matter how you look at any of these programs, there's going to be that tension there. And that comes out very clearly with the downtown ambassadors, but it could be with another organization as well. And I think that, you know, not only have we asked for details regarding different models, but also to be able to capture theoretically how that's going to play out on the ground. And with the materials I provide and give examples of how that can get very messy, and how is it going to reduce policing? How is it going to reallocate some of the resources? I think Nick Jr. needs to show that. And, you know, David Mohammed said he would provide the info and we don't have it. And now there's a debate that people want to have, and it would be really great to have some of that information. The other thing I have a question about, and I think maybe Nathan and Buna as our officers can give us as we move along, how we are going to develop our process and how we make our own process transparent and how we vote on the recommendations. And I think that's like really, really important, that we as a group have to feel really good about how we're doing this. And I agree that we may have recommendations that aren't in the report too, that we're looking at a whole body of different kinds of programs and alternatives and things like that.
Thank you for, and yeah, we can definitely jump into that discussion. Let me go to Ms. Cole here.
Thank you, Commissioner Fine. I just wanted to remind everyone that exactly what you said on the latter part of your comment is that we're agendized the topic for a plan and a process for coming up with the task force recommendations. And so we need to probably stick to that, and we can put your concerns on a future agenda. Thank you.
Commissioner Octon. I believe you're muted, Commissioner.
Here I am. I think that the City Council, shortly after the murder of George Floyd, decided that something needs to be done, maybe something radical rather than merely tweaks and nips and tucks in the present system. And so they created a task force for reimagining public safety, not just making little changes here and there, but reimagining. And now we're nearing the end of the process that they commissioned. And when we see the report by the consultants, I think we will see what the consultants have decided that the City Council wanted to hear, because it is a cliche in the consulting business, at least according to the shelf full of books on the subject of consulting that I've studied, most of them written by the CEOs of consulting firms. It's a cliche that the reports you get from consultants, if you've commissioned consulting, the reports you get reflect what the consultant thinks you want to hear. And we have no reason to think that it will be any different here. I think that the comments that we've had already this evening from my fellow commissioners indicate that they are not confident that the report will recommend anything more than nips and tucks and small changes in the way things that Berkeley does now. It's my understanding that there are about 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the United States, and that they pretty much all follow one major, form of organization and doing things, some more, some less, but pretty much all in the same general boat. Reimagining, to me, would mean changing that model and putting much of the city's efforts to provide public safety in the hands of organizations other than the two that now exist, the two being the police and the fire department. So I'm eager to learn whether the Nick Jr. report will say we need to have other types of organizations in the city that will take on substantial parts of what the police are now doing. If that's not the case, then I hope that this commission, our commission, will provide its own reports, either as a body or as individuals, saying what we think needs to be done to separate substantial parts of the city's provision for public safety and put them in the hands of people and groups other than the police.
Thank you. Commissioner Harger.
Yeah, circling back to my request for like a codified list of dates and meetings and stuff, because I know that we just mentioned some meetings that are not in our typical schedule, as well as the timeline of the report. So would it be possible to get that made available to the public on our website?
So there is a timeline on the website that we had presented the last time about the community meetings and when feedback needed to be submitted. So that is already on the website. I think that since the Monday meeting, we have added a few task force meetings that I can add to that to include those.
Great, thank you.
Okay, well, we can move to more of an open discussion then. I know many commissioners have and truly valid concerns about how we will best present, our views and our message, whatever it may be, in terms of the report we're getting. My thoughts have been, basically you're going to have a two-pronged approach between individual responses and the subcommittees. And we can use tonight, either if we use our existing ones or create a subcommittee to hear certain forms of the report or sections of the report. I know it's a little difficult given the very broad separations of the report, the broad categories of the report. Our commissioners, if it's not coming to you now, completely understandable. If it comes to you, you see the report, and on Friday, you're like, yeah, this is a change we should make, or this is how we should respond. Please email staff and we can definitely look at that as well. Because I'm to be very honest in the sense that I don't have a brilliant way. I'm not going to pretend I do. But once we get the report, if folks feel like they have a thought process on how to best do it, open to hearing it. And again, I agree with Buna that we really should have a vote at some point, probably that December 2nd meeting, about each and every recommendation. So our position as a collective is clear, and then obviously a companion report with that. So I don't know if anyone else wants to discuss right now, has questions in terms of that process.
I have a couple of things. The report comes out Friday. Our police budget committee meets on Tuesday. At least we would probably take that Tuesday to collectively go through the report and decide how we might want to respond as a subcommittee or at the subcommittee decide that we should really all respond. So we have a meeting set for Tuesday where we can actually start doing some of that work. So my suggestion would be that all subcommittees need to set up very early meetings in November so that as subcommittees, they can also respond saying, we believe we want, our subcommittee would like to offer our recommendations or, you know, what we would like to see in the report in this format. I hope we can make our decisions on next Tuesday as to how that particular subcommittee looks at the report and sees what fits in with reduce or whatever. I know there's going to be some duplication. We're going to have to be cognizant of that. But so we're going to meet Tuesday. We will have something back, hopefully by Thursday, in terms of how at least our subcommittee wants to approach this. Anybody here from the subcommittee that feels we should do it sooner than Tuesday?
I say I agree with Tuesday. Sorry, not sure. Yeah, commissioners, go ahead and jump in if you raise your hand right now. Mr. Harger, Mr. Fine.
I can jump in. I just looked at the website because I wasn't sure that I had seen that schedule on the website, and I don't think that I see it, and perhaps it's just the formatting of the website, but I don't see any kind of timeline or anything on the website.
I'll pull it for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I can talk with staff and make sure we get a timeline up there that's clear for both us and the public. Yeah, maybe it's buried in the report or in an additional material section. All right, anything else at this moment?
Yeah.
Yes, Commissioner Fine.
Okay. I had a couple of things I was wondering about. We've had 3 subcommittees since the start. The community engagement subcommittee was put together to respond to the citywide surveys and to make sure the listening sessions were inclusive of a lot of different groups. So that was sort of the jurisdiction of that. The other one deals with alternatives to policing. And I know that the policing and budget subcommittee deals with policing. I don't know, it potentially you're going to address the entire report. I know when I go through a report the first time, I also look for emerging themes, just what occurs to me as I go through it and I look at the recommendations. And I'm kind of wondering if we could start a Google Doc with the recommendations where we can collectively as a task force be working on something there too, because I don't think it's all going to fit neatly into these little subcommittee categories. That might be the structure of the way we do our recommendations. It might work very, very well. But I'm trying, I mean, the other 2 subcommittees really haven't met a lot. We haven't met in community engagement for months. And we met maybe 2 or 3 times for alternatives to policing. We were not a subcommittee that met every Tuesday for like the whole time. And so I'm trying to think about how do people on the task force as a group, I guess there's 15 or 17 of us, meaningfully participate in a way to ensure people's voices are heard.
It's fine. I don't think that's a bad suggestion at all. Again, I'm saying we may. I don't know the law this well, but we may run into some Brown Act issues even there.
Oh.
Unfortunately, I know. But yeah, go ahead.
That's why I'm wondering, like, if a subcommittee starts work, then what do you do? Publish it to the whole task force? I mean, that's why I was raising the issue as a process. How are we going to work as a process?
Okay, this is one way that I see it could happen. and I'm looking for more brilliant ideas, as is Nathan, is that when we meet on Tuesday, let's just make it a scenario. The police subcommittee meets on Tuesday. By Tuesday, hopefully all the members have read the report, have a sense of which sections really strongly belong with what our charge is, and put together our first cut. Might not happen that first Tuesday. And that could be sent to staff to be forwarded to everybody, as well as Nick Jr. Can we make that happen?
That sounds like really an optimal approach. Because I think you're the steadiest group, and it could really help the whole task force to get on board.
So a couple of things I want to make sure that we do today is, I'm guessing that not, thank you, Buna, for that suggestion. And I have some things to add, and my suggestion is based on what you suggested, which is to just understand, I don't think every single commissioner is on a subcommittee. So if you're going to take this approach, let's make sure that we maybe rejigger the other subcommittees, maybe dissolve them and create new subcommittees, basically divide up our group so everybody has a subcommittee they can go to do some in-depth discussion. And as part of our subcommittee work, I'm thinking of it almost as we start off by doing some kind of a temperature check. So some kind of vote, agree, disagree. So the ones, if by some magic we all agree on something, then that's great. We can put that aside. The ones we are mixed on, we have a discussion, and the ones we disagree on, we'll have to figure out. And if we agree, if there's a lot of alignment between the agrees and the disagrees, that's good. But if there's not a lot of alignment, then that's where the tough discussions will have to happen within our group. But at least we'll get a temperature check, and every subcommittee could do that temperature check and talk about where we see disagreement. Now, not seeing the report at all and not really understanding how many recommendations we're looking at, I'm assuming other parts of the report are things like the community engagement stuff. Like on that, really, our feedback is just making sure that it's reflecting the reality of the process, but nothing more than that, right? So it really is just the recommendations that we're looking at. I want to make sure for myself that we are all honest about our capacity. I keep hearing we're going to do a parallel report. I keep hearing, I'm feeling a little bit right now, like with the Nick Jr. report, like that's its own thing, and we are going to do the work they did over the past 9 months or whatever, that we're going to do it in the next month. And that kind of goal really worries me, because I personally don't have the capacity in this next month to throw myself into doing that. So another task for the subcommittees when they meet should be to be like, okay, what's realistic and what happens after city council has met? How can we give our feedback so that it's in front of council? But as Buna, as you said, nothing is final, right? All of these things are going to then go into more task forces, more commissions, more things. So can we then decide what is the one thing we want council to do? Like, is there any budgetary recommendation, for example, that we can provide instead of, the big goals? Can we look at what the short-term steps are instead of trying to be like, this is all encompassing and this has to be perfect? So that's the other thing I would say, is for a subcommittee to set a goal for what the immediate step they want council to look at. And then, I just want to say, I don't know how we're going to sort of deliver a parallel report that we all have consensus on. And that's a part that I'm, again, not hearing from Nick Jr. Any other report that we do, and this is not specific to you, but any process I've been part of where we've had such a report, at some point you have to come back and you have to resolve the comments. And I'm not hearing any space for us to resolve comments. We're just saying that we're just going to list all these different comments. I mean, what is the point of that? I mean, where is the struggle with the community? Where is the conversation that we're having that's not informed by, you know, our point of view, our anecdotal evidence, our experiences? At some point, we have to do the hard work of meshing that so it reflects just the community we've collected here. So where those discussions are having, and maybe those are happening in the subcommittees as well, but a temperature check, and then a discussion about how we're going to resolve the comments, and then some realistic plan for what our report looks like, because I'm not willing to do a parallel report in this 1 month when the consultant has been supposedly doing that for 9 months. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah, definitely hear your concerns there, Commissioner Ghosh. Yeah, certainly we don't have the ability to do the process they did. I mean, obviously that's not going to happen. I do think, you know, we have, well, look, honestly, I can't speak of people's capacity. That's the honest answer. If everyone in the task force said, we're not doing it this way, that would be the will of the task force. But assuming some of us are willing to do small parts, I think you're completely right. Once we get to the subcommittee level, you know, look at what parts of the report, at least for me, this is how I structured in my mind. What part of the reports do I think are critical for me to respond to? For me, I'm gonna start there. And then for me, I'm gonna lean in, like, what parts of the report are critical to respond to that I think I have expertise in that is helpful for the public. Obviously for me, that leans more on the policing side. So my thought is, if we break it into pieces and allow folks who have expertise, knowledge, or just even just real interest to focus in on those parts of the report. And there may be, of course, when we come back for our November meeting, we'll have that discussion about overarching themes, right? And I know that's important in a report like this. But in terms of like the individual recommendations, at least in my mind, that's kind of been how I thought I'd work it out. You know, not attempting to, you know, mirror every portion of Nick Jr.'s report. So yes, it's being delivered at the same time. I don't know if it'll be parallel. It'll probably be its own thing. And, you know, obviously not doing the work Nick Jr. has done over the past 9 months. But that's really what I'm thinking right now. Sorry, Christopher, I forget if you had your hand up earlier or if you have something now.
Let other people go ahead of me.
Okay, Commissioner Chima or Vice Chair Chima?
Ned's hand was up before mine, but my comment is very short. We need to recognize that the SCU has already been funded $7.5 million. Another 1.2 million is going to 6, 7, 8 organizations in smaller grants to do bridge work or crisis response work while the SCU gets in place. So we already know what everybody has bought into. Nobody, I think, has an argument about creating an SCU. For me, that's a check. 7.5 million already funded. Council voted on it. That's a check. I can put all that aside and then look at what Nathan is saying. What are the other things that I have some expertise in that I can actually add to or request that something be taken away because I know something more than the consultants might, will then become the process over the next few weeks till some final place that I'm talking as a person that I will reach where it says, well, tried really, really, really hard to get consensus through rewriting, commenting, giving suggestions. But if we don't have consensus on the Nick Jr. report, because if I remember, and Margaret, you can correct me, I am a little concerned about, a report from Nick Jr. that most of the task force agreed to most of the recommendations, or some did and some didn't. And then another report written by a subcommittee or other members of the task force. Who are we writing that for? The city is paying Nick Jr. to produce a report with input and feedback from the task force. So how would our report, a separate report? I'm not seeing the need for a separate report. That's what I guess I'm saying.
Yeah, you know, as I'm thinking about this, I mean, it logically makes sense that each of the current subcommittees meet. Of course, it is important that people with policing expertise and police budget expertise are addressing those issues. And as far as alternatives to policing, looking at those kinds of programs and stuff that are being proposed in the report. And as far as community engagement, also seeing whether that equity lens has been applied even-handedly to the recommendations based upon the research that was obtained from both the citywide survey and the listening sessions. So I think, like, as a start, it's really worthwhile. And going back to the legislative goals and whether they met them or not, I think that's like really important, get that out of the way. And hopefully each subcommittee could report out before, is November 18 the next meeting? I think in that way, I think it's very economical and thoughtful to be able to do it. But at the same time, I think there's gonna be overarching things that come up that cross over between the subcommittees. And I think it's going to surround whether something's a service or it's a policing act. I think there are tensions that inherently come up with crisis services versus people committing quality of life infractions, that kind of thing, where different subcommittees may have different perspectives. And that's why I think, like, by November 10, we should share what we have so everybody is on the same page going into a meeting. So we have a really robust discussion, particularly on those areas where there's a lot of tensions that just exist because they're embedded social problems.
Yeah, so you're 100% right, Commissioner Feinl, on that. And yeah, I think that's again where the subcommittees can give us an opportunity to have that earlier feedback heard and seen by the full task force. So everyone, as you said, can have that discussion on the 18th. Yeah, Commissioner Linda.
Yeah, I really want to, I don't like what Commissioner Vice Chair Chima just said. As much as I love and adore Vice Chair Chima, I don't have a problem about us discussing and commenting on the good, the bad, the ugly of what is in the report, and also what is not in the report, because we know that major issues that have been brought up by this task force and other people are not in the report. And that's not condemning Nick Jr., that's just a reality. And I think it's perfectly fine for us to not just say yes, no, but this is what we think is great in the report, and this is what we think is just conceptually doesn't make sense, and or whatever those things are. And I don't want to preview anything since I haven't seen this thing. So, you know, with all, you know, I don't want to go overboard on anything until I actually see this thing. But one of the concerns I have is when we had the dispatch people, they were pretty adamant that they did not like what was being proposed. So I want to know to what extent Nick Jr. has, in a sense, analyzed and struggled with the issues they raise, or whether they've just blown them off because they don't think they're right, or whatever. But that's something that any responsible person is going to have to do, because these are the city employees who are doing these things. And if they say something doesn't make sense, then you have to give some credence to that. Doesn't mean you have to agree with it, but you have to give some credence to it. The police indicated they had objections, or at least Lieutenant McGee indicated that some police had objections. I don't know who he was speaking for when he spoke. And we may agree or not agree. We don't have to agree with what the police have to say, but they've been the ones who have been addressing a lot of these issues, and we have to give at least some credence to that and not blow them off. And so I just want to make sure that we make clear to our audience, and one of our audiences is the council, but we need to make clear to the council and to the city what we think is good and bad and whatever about each of these items, and what more has to be considered, and how the council or the city should look at some of these issues, and what are the things that really need more struggle and more discussion and more debate, and what are the things need to be looked at. But I don't want to, as I said before, this has not been a participatory process. And, we've been able to make comments, but, it's sort of the basic premise: whoever puts the thing on paper first rules the day. And if you're just making reactions to somebody, then you're not really in control of the debate or what's going on. And it's not like I need to be in control of the debate, God forbid. But what I just want to make sure is that we don't limit our ability to make comments that we think are appropriate. And, we may agree, we may disagree, there may be unanimity, there may be lots of outliers. I have no idea. And until we see this thing, who knows? So.
Yeah, no, thank you, Commissioner. Agreed as well. Until we see, it's hard to know, but we'll know soon.
Can I, if we are doing discussions in subcommittee, can we please prioritize grouping people at 6:35, and some folks have to leave at 7? So is
including me. So yes.
Because I think we'll get into some Brown Act stuff if we're just turning the existing subcommittees into new things, and some people are on 2 subcommittees. So
can we just split people in half so that everybody is on 1 or 2 subcommittees?
It has to be less than half.
Yeah. I mean, I lean yes, in the sense that we said we were going to create a process to review this report. And the only possible way for us to do that while following the Brown Act would be to create subcommittees. And at least, if we want to move membership, I think that's okay to me.
So
I'm sorry, Commissioner Ghost, do you have a particular?
Oh, I was just going to say, we have our Tuesday subcommittee, which has been pretty stable. So it seems to me, for the purposes of discussing the report, everybody else is on a second subcommittee that has, and we either rename or create new subcommittees that are specifically for discussing the report. And that can be duplicative in the first meeting, and it should be duplicative, because I think we haven't had a discussion. We haven't had any kind of struggle. So that's a space for it. They could be even smaller, but I don't know how to divide people up in that way. I feel like, the half and half is probably not a bad thing for who shows up.
But now it sounds like Commissioner Lindheim wants to do the whole report. So why don't we just go into different groups and do the whole report each?
Well, we can discuss that at our subcommittee if you want to do a whole report, but.
No. I don't think that's what Margaret just said. And correct me if I'm wrong. What I heard was that we have subcommittees established. And so far, we have been meeting, and there some more, some less. And there are 2 subcommittees, the one that doesn't have all 8. Police budget is the only one that has always had, now I think we might be down to 7. So we have 2 new commissioners, not 1, but 2, Tara, right? From the Youth Commission.
Oh, yeah.
Jamie's 1, and then somebody joined at the last meeting.
Nina.
Nina, sorry.
No, what I was saying was, Dan just
One
said,
second, Margaret.
okay.
1 second. Is that let's have our first meeting of each of the subcommittees. And then very quickly send that communication through staff saying, we've met. This is the part this particular subcommittee would really like to take on. We could do that as well at our subcommittee meetings, is ask people.
Yeah, Buna, sorry.
Creating
all I'm
new
saying is
subcommittees.
we don't have to create new subcommittees, but
Yeah.
we should look at our list of commissioners and make sure everybody's on a subcommittee so they have
I
an
agree.
opportunity to participate. And so our Tuesday subcommittee, whatever it's called, I don't even care, whatever it's called. So everybody else, we should pass some kind of motion saying that all these other people in this other subcommittee, or add to the budgeting subcommittee, if that's the way to do it. I don't know.
I feel like each subcommittee should be able to look at the report, like Dan was saying, in totality. Because my feeling is if one person expresses that, the whole group is like gonna want to have a fair shake at commenting on what matters to them. And it doesn't matter what subcommittee somebody's in, we've all got thoughts. The one thing I'm wondering, and you and Nathan can address this, is that we all get something out there in writing before the next meeting. So we're really like able to work in a very focused way, if that would be possible.
Yeah, no, I think so. I would think we can definitely send something out. I was thinking in terms of, I guess technically we could probably vote and ask subcommittees to do that, but I think we can send something out to tell folks, yeah, let's try to get this in, roughly a week before the meeting, so everyone has time to actually digest the information and be prepared for the 18th.
And then on Monday, we meet with staff. So the report comes out Friday. Monday, we meet with staff. Try to get a sense of, how they're going to support us to get where we want to get to, and send something in before like November the 10th, and that could circulate and get back to Nick Jr. as well. And then on November the 18th, what would be very valuable is if Nick Jr. was to take all the comments that we've sent in and the agree, disagree, whatever, if we decide to go that direction, and that they can fold that into a feedback back to us saying, we heard you, this is what we saw from what you've sent, we're going to integrate some of this, some we're not able to change. So that 18th meeting is a very critical meeting. If we get stuff to you, Cheryl, by the 10th, can you turn something back around by the 18th to bring back to the task force, so the task force members can feel some assurance that they were heard and their recommendations taken seriously?
When you say turn something around, are you asking? Because I think what I keep saying is that all of the task force feedback can absolutely be included in the final report, right? If you're asking, will we change our recommendations? I don't have the answer because I don't know what the request for the change is.
Okay.
Right. I don't know how.
That's fair. But if we get that to you by November the 10th, can you by November the 18th tell us which recommendations you're willing to change language on, which you're not, or which you might even actually decide that, oh, you really like what one of us sent, and add that and take something else out. That would be a very open, healthy process if we can create this communication loop. Subcommittees meet next week. November the 8th, we get stuff. November 10th, we get stuff back to you and staff. November the 18th, you give us something back and say, this is how we're proceeding with working on our final report for the work session for council. And then we'll actually know which are the things that we just really have differences on.
Yeah, I think that can happen, and I want to be able to respond affirmatively in confirming that that turnaround can happen. I conceptually agree with what you're asking. I totally get what you're asking for. And I want to be able to solidify that response better, and maybe I can respond on it in an email. But I think that that is a logical request.
Thank you. Let's go ahead, folks, just real quick. And first, vote upon just getting these meetings on our schedule officially. And then we can discuss for new members who are not on a subcommittee, getting them on subcommittees. So I'm a motion to agendize meetings for Thursday, November 18th, and then Thursday, December 2nd at our normal time, 6 p.m. And yeah, I'll need a second.
I second.
Commissioner Fine,
Yes.
Commissioner Jigu,
Yes.
Vice Chair Chima, Vice Chair Chima.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Linheim,
Yes.
Commissioner Ghosh,
Is this 16th or 18th?
the
It
18th and
should be
December
that
2nd.
Thursday.
Yeah, I have a transportation commission meeting that day, so I'm gonna say no for now.
That Thursday. Commissioner Hyde,
Yes.
Commissioner Malvito, Chair Mizell,
Yes.
Commissioner Opton,
Yes.
Commissioner Moon, Commissioner Hugger,
Yes.
Commissioner Lutzker.
I will also say a tentative yes, but just for everyone to know, that's actually the evening that the feedback will be presented at the Transportation Commission on BERCDOT, on the BERCDOT public engagement process. So there's a bit of an issue there with all of this. So I don't know. I will abstain with that information. I don't know how that affects things.
Thank you. Commissioner Ho,
Yes.
Commissioner Dangerfield, Commissioner Thompson,
Yes.
and Commissioner Crook. Thank you. Motion passed.
Okay. Let's see. Is Commissioner Crook still here?
Chair Mizell, she had to leave.
Okay. It's unfortunate.
Chair, would it be helpful for me to share the composition of the subcommittees on my screen for everyone to remind themselves?
Yes.
Would that be helpful for you?
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Thompson, just want to prioritize you for this. So I know this, the process we're now going into, the titles may not perfectly reflect the process now at the subcommittee, but is there any subcommittee in particular you would like to serve on in terms of discussing the full draft report and then responding back to it?
I'm happy to join any. I don't really have a preference.
Okay. How many members do we have on policing now? Let's see.
It's full. We have 8. But Buna, Vice Chair, is on the 2 subcommittees, so that we'll have to talk about that. I guess, sorry.
Okay.
One subcommittee is going to disappear. That's the alternative solutions to gender-based violence, because our report will be done and there will be no need for us to meet on that particular thing. And then I'm happy to get off the improve and reinvest so that there's no duplication and no chance of Mr. or Ms. or Mrs. Brown to start acting up.
Is improve and reinvest is supposed to be alternatives to policing? Or we're just addressing the report as a whole anyway, so.
Yeah, I think we're more or less addressing the report as a whole. You know, obviously yeah.
So Chair Mizell, excuse me.
Yes.
I think Commissioner Crook is still on. I believe she was having technical
okay.
issues. So perhaps if you could ask her again. Thank you.
No, it's great to hear. Yes, Commissioner Crook, just wanted to ask in terms of, and I believe you're here for this part of the discussion, but we're trying to get folks on subcommittees to first just go over the full report at the next meeting after it gets released on Friday, and then to report back out. And if there's any subcommittee in particular, though, we're really going to be looking at the full report in our 3 active subcommittees.
It's not going to be looked at in all 3 subcommittees, because that might create some Brown Act issues, because there are folks in more than one subcommittee. So I would suggest the policing budget and alternatives to policing and improve and reinvest be the 2 subcommittees that are discussing it in full, and that we just add, we remove Vice Chair Chima from improve and reinvest and add whoever else is remaining to that subcommittee. Though a suggestion I did want to make is maybe you and Vice Chair Chima should actually be in 2 separate ones. That's up to you to help lead us maybe a little bit, but then you all will talk, so maybe that's not a good idea, because that might break Brown Act.
Yeah, we do talk.
Yeah, so maybe keeping y'all in the same one is better. So I would make a motion to add everybody else to the improve and reinvest. I don't want to jump the gun here.
2 people. That's 2 people.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and I think that's a good
Nina
suggestion.
and Jamie.
Is there anyone else who's not on the call this evening?
Commissioner Ijigu also would be added to
right, Commissioner
improve and
Ijigu.
reinvest. Right, Commissioner Ijigu. So it would be Ijigu.
So I've just got some communication from Commissioner Crook, and she says she's happy to join any subcommittee, so she's okay with that.
Okay.
For the record.
Can we get the email list of names to send out an invitation?
And we have to take Diaz off, improve and reinvest.
Yeah, let's say yes, he's not there. So I think that works. Okay, so let me, and folks stop me if I'm doing a motion to add Commissioner Thompson, Commissioner Crook, and Commissioner Ijigu to the improve and reinvest subcommittee. Yeah, that's, I think
Take
that's
me off.
Chair Mizell.
Okay, yes.
One more, Commissioner Moon. We have Commissioner Moon also. That's not on a subcommittee currently.
Okay, and Commissioner Moon, are we still?
So are there
under the number there?
16? Do we
Yeah, I was
currently have
about to
16
ask.
members?
We actually have 15 currently.
So then at 8 in the policing budget, are we breaking some rule? Shamika?
I'm sorry, Vice Chair Chima, I was counting.
Well,
My
that's okay.
apologies. Give me 1 second.
Sure, take your time.
I'm sorry, we actually have 16, so we're okay with that one. My apologies. So no one can be added to that one. And so we're thinking that everyone else, all other 8 join the community engagement or the improve and reinvest. Yes? Is that the motion?
Yeah, so actually let's keep that motion on the table. First motion should be just to remove Vice Chair Chima from the subcommittee. And then the motion to add Commissioner Moon, Commissioner Thompson, and Commissioner Crook to improve and reinvest.
And Commissioner Jigu.
And Commissioner
And remove Commissioner Diaz. I mean, if that.
and Commissioner Diaz. Okay.
Remove.
Thank you. And Ms. Cole, take your time with that.
Give me a second. I need to count and make sure we're good. So I'm keeping up, but barely. 1 second. Okay, great. Okay, so can we formally make another motion just so that everyone's clear, I'm sorry, Chair Mizell?
Yes. So first, I think we need to do these in separate motions. So first motion would be to remove Vice Chair Chima from Improve and Reinvest Subcommittee. And then the second motion I'll put on the floor is to add Commissioner
Chair
Jigu.
Mizell,
Yes.
remove Vice Chair Chima and Diaz
And Diaz.
in that motion.
I'm sorry, I didn't know if Diaz was necessary since he's no longer on the task force.
You're right. Thanks.
And then second motion, adding Commissioner Jigu, Commissioner Moon, Commissioner Thompson, and Commissioner Crook. And if I'm forgetting someone again, please tell me, to the Improve and Reinvest Subcommittee.
Moon. And Moon.
Yes. So yeah, if you're able to read out the first motion, unless, or Commissioner, do you have a question or?
I'd love to second both motions if I can. And then I also am watching the clock closely. And I have one important comment question that I want to ask Cheryl directly. And I want to try and do that before 7. So, but I'd love to second both motions if I may.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, if we can vote on this, and we can definitely get to that question. So on the first motion to remove Vice Chair Chima from the Improve and Reinvest Subcommittee. Yeah, so my motion, we have the second.
Second, Alicia or Harger.
Thank you. I'll call roll for that motion.
Yes.
Commissioner Fine?
Yes.
Commissioner Jigu?
Yes.
Vice Chair Chima?
Yes.
Commissioner Linheim?
Thumbs up. I think that's yes.
Commissioner Linheim is yes. Commissioner Ghosh?
Yes.
Commissioner Hyde?
Yes.
Commissioner Malvito? Chair Mizell?
Yes.
Commissioner Opton?
Yes.
Commissioner Moon? Commissioner Harger?
Yes.
Commissioner Lutzker?
Yes.
Commissioner Ho?
Yes.
Commissioner Dangerfield? Chair, I just received an email from Commissioner Crook, who's voting yes for the record. She's having audio issues.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Thompson?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
And then can I get I think Commissioner Hyde seconded the second motion, so.
Sure. Commissioner Fine?
Yes.
Commissioner Jigu?
Yes.
Vice Chair Chima?
Yes.
Commissioner Linheim?
Yes.
Commissioner Ghosh?
Yes.
Commissioner Hyde?
Yes.
Commissioner Malvito, Chair Mizell,
Yes.
Commissioner Upton,
Yes.
Commissioner Moon, Commissioner Harger.
This is to add the remaining members to improve and reinvest.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Hope,
Yes.
Commissioner Dangerfield, Commissioner Thompson,
Yes.
and Commissioner Crook. Yes, for the record, I received an email.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Okay. Before we go to you, Commissioner Hyde, just real quick. Vice Chair, I'm going to have to head out here the next
got it.
minute or two in case we don't end right on time.
I got
But Commissioner Hyde.
Great. I'm sorry I didn't think of
Go
this.
ahead, Pamela.
Thank you. Sorry I didn't think of this before. I'd like to very specifically ask Cheryl and confirm that this would be a yes or no. If there can be an additional feedback loop between the draft report on the 29th and the, it sounds like the 18th of November. And what I'm asking for is, I know that before the alternative responses report was written, that the dispatch team had not been incorporated, and they have some strong feelings about what parts of it may work and what parts of it may not. We in our meetings, and I think that the Nick Jr. folks were there in those meetings, you guys also then heard some of their things that they think may not work about the suggested CERN structure. To Commissioner Lindheim's earlier point, it feels crucial that Nick Jr. get with the entire dispatch team and whoever whatever their supervisory structure is, and work through the things that they think may not work. We can't do that because it's not our report. We didn't write it. We don't have this expertise as commissioners. We're members of the public. And once this report is submitted to City Council, I don't think that, it's not clear to me that City Council would sit with dispatch and really get something successful for the CERN structure. And thirdly, I want to point out that there are other departments in the city that are aiming to make revamps or adjustments to dispatch, specifically fire, and specifically with regard to covering for fire services, especially up in the hills. They would like to, and they aim to, make changes to dispatch. And I fear that some of the Nick Jr. changes to dispatch and the other departments' changes to dispatch are going to conflict. So Cheryl, can you please sit with dispatch and work through all of their concerns so that the report on the 18th takes everything into account and they, as a main stakeholder, are fully on board with what you're suggesting?
I don't have an answer for you. I can find out.
Can I inform that because I'm on the SCU steering committee? Nick Jr. and RDA have met with dispatch a number of times. Yes, it's true. Fire has a priority dispatching consultant contract up to $100,000 this year, over 3 years potentially. But there is a structural reform that's going into place with the SCU because the police department has been handling all the emergency and non-emergency calls. It's going to be a slow implementation process. We had a long SCU meeting last Tuesday, partly discussing that, but it's not just, it's going to go, we'll have our recommendations for the task force and for City Council, but this is going to be something over time that develops. And in addition to this, at 6:30 tonight, and I will send it to Shamika and the officers, RDA released the community engagement report. And in approximately 2 weeks, they will release the SCU recommendations. So that's going to have additional dispatch information.
So that's great. Thank you, Commissioner Fine. How do we resolve all the intentions for change in dispatch? And also, how do we resolve their resistance or requests for change in the Nick Jr. report.
If you look at a lot of the non-crisis police models, you have to develop a level of trust and rapport that's sufficient enough that the police are willing to work with the non-police crisis response. And it'll probably start when they issue the RFP around May or June with soft calls, like wellness checks or the easier homelessness. We don't know for sure because RDA is in the process of going over this, but there's a level of uncertainty, particularly when behavioral health isn't on par with police, fire, or EMT. And at the same time, they don't have best practices in place either. I mean, I was at a national 911 conference last week, and Berkeley just isn't quite there yet, but we're getting to the point where we're about to start. So the recommendations can recommend what may be possible to work in a very phased in implementation.
Okay, so let me just review. Then it sounds like other departments are going to have priority for making changes to dispatch. And then CERN, as a Nick Jr. recommendation, is going to be looped in during and maybe after, and able to make some changes, but some of the stuff in Nick Jr.'s report may conflict with what the other departments are doing and will do first.
I would say right now, we don't know the answer to that. I mean, I'm just basing mine on reading like so many non-crisis response models and knowing SCU really well. But I don't know what Nick Jr. is going to say. I know from a sit-along that, you know, all the different CAD types of calls, I know it from the auditor's report. But at the same time, they could say something entirely different.
Also, we don't know for a fact that the city council will say, yes, we want the CERN model. So we're making a lot of assumptions here, even after Nick Jr. has, you know, this process is over. There's a whole other process that starts. Dan, you had your hand up?
Yeah. I'm less concerned about getting to agreement as I am about making sure that the issues are clear. You know, this isn't a negotiating process. Basically, the best contribution everybody can make is to lay out what the issues are, what the differences are, what the agreements are. And, you know, ultimately, we're not going to decide this anyway. And most of this is going to be decided really in the implementation. And, you know, and my guess, just to hazard a guess, is that all of the things that are currently in tier 1 for CERN, that those, it's going to go baby steps. And, you know, that the tier 1 non-criminal concept, some of those things will be included and not all of them. And just because we're moving from one system to another, and you don't just sort of throw everything out and move to something else, especially when you don't have any staff to do it. So anyway, I'm not all that concerned. What I am concerned about is just making sure we lay out what the issues are. And you know, and I'm fine with Nick Jr. making their case, and I'm fine with dispatch saying, hey, you know, at least the way we're trained today, that doesn't work. And then the response could be, well, get trained differently, or no, we don't want the system, or whatever. But I think the most important thing is just not to get to agreement, but to at least lay out what all the differences or the issues are.
I agree with that. And I also just wanted to say, like, the recommendation is a pilot, which to me is very different from saying that we're overnight changing it based on this. Like, we can agree or disagree on the model, but it's also a pilot. So then our recommendation then should be what the pilot looks like, how to make the pilot work for us and give us answers to questions that we have.
Shamika, what else do we have on the agenda?
We did next steps, which was voting on the meeting dates. And so we don't have anything further on the agenda, Vice Chair Chima.
So unless somebody has something.
Vice Chair Chima, can we go to public comment?
Yeah.
At this moment, thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. So we have one person currently for public comment. Emily, you should be allowed to speak.
Thank you. I'll keep my comments brief because I have to get to PAB as well. I wanted to say I really appreciate everyone's questions about, how much time should we spend even making our feedback, because we don't know how, like, to the report, because it's unclear how much of it can be woven in. And it raises questions for me about all these town halls and open, what is the point of them if essentially the report's being done? But I completely understand the consultants, you can't really deal in conceptuals, but it's like, what is the point of all this public comment over the next month? And how will that be reflected? And it's a shame that it's coming so late. The other quick question, comment was, I just realized about a week ago that there's this RPS website for this body. I mean, there's the city website, but then there's, I believe, a website that the consultant created. They have different kinds of information. They look really different. I don't know where to go. I also couldn't find the, dates anywhere, but it's a bit confusing. Does everyone even know that this other resource exists? I may have been alone. It's laid out nicely, the RPS one, you can see the reports. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out, that may be part of the confusion. It's like these different websites, and where are people supposed to be looking for the latest information? But thank you all. And I'm excited about the 2 added meetings, believe it or not, but thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Chima. We do not have any further public comment.
Right. Does any commissioner have a comment? Otherwise, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Thank you, Dana.
Second.
Thank you. Vote, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm writing. Commissioner Bai, thank you. Commissioner Jigu,
Yes.
Vice Chair Chima,
Yes.
Commissioner Linheim,
Yes.
Commissioner Ghosh,
Yes.
Commissioner Hyde,
Yes.
Commissioner Malvito, Chair Mizell, Commissioner Upton,
Yes.
Commissioner Moon, Commissioner Harger,
Yes.
Commissioner Lutzker,
Yes.
Commissioner Ho,
Yes.
Commissioner Dangerfield, Commissioner Thompson,
Yes.
Commissioner Cook. Thank you. Meeting adjourned. Vice Chair? Yes,
Meeting adjourned.
thank you. Good night, everyone.